The mess hall fell silent as Master Sergeant Cole's coffee mug shattered against the concrete floor. His face drained of color, eyes locked on the intricate phoenix tattoo sprawling across the recruit's exposed back wings of fire and resurrection etched in vivid detail. That ink, his voice cracked, barely a whisper. I've seen it before. On soldiers who died 5 years ago. The small Asian-American woman everyone had mocked for 2 weeks straight slowly turned around, her eyes carrying the weight of battlefields that shouldn't exist in her memory. Death, she said quietly, pulling her torn shirt closed, is sometimes just the beginning of the real mission. The alarm shrieked at 0430 hours, slicing through the North Carolina humidity like a rusty blade. Fort Ridgeline's newest batch of recruits stumbled from their bunks, but Linh Tran was already standing at the foot of her bed gear, squared-away boots gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. She'd been awake for an hour, old habits from another life bleeding through her cover. "Look at little mouse trying to impress the sergeants." Marcus Rodriguez sneered, his massive frame blocking the narrow aisle between bunks. At 6'3" and 240 pounds of former high school linebacker, he'd appointed himself the alpha of their training platoon. "What's wrong? Princess Daddy made you do push-ups before kindergarten." Linh didn't respond. She simply adjusted her patrol cap with mechanical precision, the bill exactly 2 fingers above her eyebrows. Her silence irritated Marcus more than any comeback could have. Max 1. Master Sergeant Cole burst through the barracks door, his voice booming across the space. "Formation, move your worthless bodies!" But as the recruits scrambled past him, his eyes caught something in Tran's movement, the way she pivoted on her heel, the unconscious sweep of her gaze checking corners and exits. His jaw tightened imperceptibly. Outside under the pre-dawn stars, 63 recruits formed ragged lines on the parade ground. Cole stalked the ranks like a predator, stopping at each imperfection. A wrinkled shirt here, unshined boots there. When he reached Linh, positioned perfectly at 5'2" in the 3rd row, he paused longer than usual. "Well, well. Private Tran." He pronounced her name wrong deliberately. "Tell me something, recruit. You think being squared away makes you special? Think the Army needs another tryhard who memorized the manual? No drill sergeant." Linh responded, her voice steady and pitched to carry, without shouting another detail that made Cole's eyes narrow. "No. Then why are you wasting my time trying to look like a soldier when you clearly don't have what it takes?" He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "You're what, 90 pounds soaking wet. My breakfast weighs more than you." Mini-climax 2. From the edge of the formation, Lieutenant Maria Rios, fresh out of OCS and assigned as a training observer, noticed something odd. While other recruits trembled or stiffened under Cole's verbal assault, Tran remained in a perfect parade rest. But her stance was subtly different. Her weight distribution, the angle of her feet, the micro-tension in her shoulders. It was a combat stance disguised as military bearing, someone ready to move in any direction at a split-second's notice. "Since Private Tran here thinks she's ready for the real Army," Cole announced to the formation, "she'll demonstrate the obstacle course for everyone. Show them how it's done, soldier." The obstacle course at Fort Ridgeline was a 1/4 mile of hell walls, ropes, mud pits, and barbed wire, designed to break bodies and spirits in equal measure. The fastest recorded time for a recruit was 4 minutes 32 seconds. Linh stepped to the starting line and something shifted in her posture. Subtle, but fundamental. Several recruits later swore they saw her lips moving, counting under her breath, in a rhythm that didn't match any cadence they'd been taught. Climax 3. The whistle blew. Linh didn't run, she flowed. Her approach to the first 8-foot wall was all wrong by the manual standards, but she hit it at an angle that let her use her momentum to practically run up the vertical surface. Her hands found holds that weren't supposed to exist, tiny imperfections in the wood that she'd somehow mapped in the 2 seconds of approach. "Holy shit," someone whispered from the formation. The rope climb was where small recruits usually failed. The thick, wet hemp was designed for big hands and upper body strength. But Lynn wrapped the rope around her leg in a complex pattern none of them had seen before, a Swiss seat variation that let her use her entire body as a pulley system. She ascended faster than gravity should have allowed. Cole's expression had changed from mockery to something unreadable. He pulled out his stopwatch thumb, hovering over the button. Mini Climax 4. At the mud crawl, instead of the desperate belly flop technique they'd been taught, Lynn rolled sideways into the pit using a spiral motion that kept her head above the muck while maintaining speed. The barbed wire overhead caught nothing. She moved like smoke between the strands. 3 minutes, 18 seconds. The formation stood in stunned silence. Even Marcus had stopped sneering. Lieutenant Rios stepped closer to Cole and said quietly, "That's not in any manual I've studied." "No," Cole replied, his voice strange. "It's not." Mini Climax 5. During the morning's weapons assembly drill, things got stranger. They were learning to field strip the M4 carbine, a basic skill that took most recruits several minutes to master. The instructor, Sergeant Davies, demonstrated the procedure once. "Now who wants to try first?" Davies asked. Before anyone could volunteer, Lynn stepped forward. "Permission to attempt drill, Sergeant." Davies smirked. "Sure, Tran. Let's see what you got." She picked up the weapon, and her entire demeanor changed. Her hands moved with surgical precision, but more unnervingly, her eyes weren't watching what her hands were doing. She was scanning the room, maintaining situational awareness, while her muscle memory took over. Pin out. Upper receiver separated. Bolt carrier group removed. Buffer spring extracted. In 47 seconds, the M4 lay in pieces on the table, each component placed in exact regulation order but with additions. She'd arranged them by wear patterns, subtly indicating which parts would fail first under field conditions in, say, Mini Climax 6. "Where did you learn that?" Davies demanded, his casual arrogance evaporated. "YouTube drill, Sergeant," Lynn replied, with a perfectly straight face. Someone snickered in the back, Emma Chen, another recruit who'd been watching Lynn with growing interest. But Davies wasn't buying it. Neither was Jake Moreno, the civilian contractor who maintained the weapons. He'd been passing by and stopped to watch his tablet in hand. "YouTube doesn't teach you to identify stress fractures in a bolt carrier," Jake muttered, zooming in with his tablet's camera on the way she'd positioned one particular component. "That's armorer-level knowledge." He glanced down at his tablet where he'd been updating the equipment database. On a whim, he typed Linh Tran into the personnel archive. The screen flashed, "One match found, classified." His finger hovered over the link. Mini Climax 7. The hand-to-hand combat training that afternoon was supposed to be basic holds and escapes. Sergeant Thompson, a former MMA fighter before enlisting, paired recruits up by size. But there was an odd number, and Lynn stood alone. "Guess the mouse needs a special partner," Marcus volunteered, cracking his knuckles. "I promise I'll be gentle." Thompson looked uncertain. The size difference was absurd, but Cole, watching from the side, nodded. "Let him. Sometimes the best lessons are painful ones." They squared off on the mat. Marcus towered over Lynn by more than a foot, outweighing her by easily 150 pounds. He lunged forward with a basic collar grab, the kind that should have let him control her completely. Mini Climax 8. Lynn didn't resist his strength. She redirected it. Her body pivoted like water around a stone, and suddenly Marcus was off balance. Her foot swept behind his knee while her palm struck his solar plexus with precision that spoke of countless repetitions. He hit the mat hard, gasping. "Lucky shot," he wheezed, getting back up. But it wasn't luck. Every time he attacked, she was already moving, already 3 steps ahead. She fought like someone who'd learned to combat multiple opponents using angles and momentum that made his size a liability rather than an advantage. "Enough," Thompson called out after Marcus hit the mat for the 5th time. His voice was strained. "Tran, where did you train? My older brother taught me some moves. Drill sergeant. For self-defense." Climax 9. Doctoress. Alex Turner. The base medical officer making routine rounds had been watching from the doorway. As the recruits dispersed for water, they approached Lynn with a casual air that belied their intense curiosity. "Mind if I check that wrist?" they asked, having noticed Lynn favoring her left hand slightly. Standard post-training eval. As Lynn extended her arm, Dr. Turner's fingers found more than they expected. Scar tissue, old but extensive, ran along her forearm, the kind that came from field sutures, not hospital work. Their trained eye caught other details: vaccination scars in patterns used for military deployments to Southeast Asia and Africa, micro-scarring on her knuckles, consistent with years of strike training. "Interesting medical history," Turner said carefully, meeting Lynn's eyes. "These vaccination patterns." "I traveled a lot as a kid," Lynn interrupted smoothly. "My parents were missionaries." Turner nodded slowly, but made a mental note to pull her medical intake forms later. Vinny Climax 10. That evening, Jake Moreno sat in the maintenance shop, staring at his computer screen. He'd finally accessed the classified file using credentials he probably shouldn't have. The photo that loaded made his blood run cold. It was Linh Tran, but the file was dated 2019. Status KIA. Killed in action. Unit Special Operations Task Force designator that had been redacted. Location of death classified. But there was a partial mission name visible. Phoenix Initiative. He looked at the timestamp on the mess hall security footage he'd pulled up Linh Tran eating dinner, very much alive, at 18:23 hours today. His hands shaking slightly, he opened an encrypted messaging app and typed, "We need to talk. The dead are walking at Ridgeline." Any Climax 11. In the female barracks that night, Emma Chen approached Lynn's bunk. "That thing you did today with Marcus that wasn't YouTube." Lynn looked up from the book she was reading, a dense technical manual on satellite communications that definitely wasn't part of recruit training. Sometimes YouTube has really good content. "Cut the shit," Emma said, but not unkindly. She sat on the adjacent bunk. "My mom was military intelligence before she retired. She taught me to watch people really watch them. You're not who you're pretending to be." For a moment, Lynn's mask slipped, and Emma saw something that made her breath catch exhaustion so profound it seemed to age her by decades. "Sometimes," Lynn said quietly, "we become who we need to be." Mini Climax 12. At 2200 hours, Cole stood in his office, secure phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, sir. She's here. No, she hasn't made contact yet. The performance metrics are off the charts. She's not even trying to hide it anymore." "Yes, sir, I understand. Nightfall protocols are in effect." He hung up and stared at a faded photograph on his wall, 8 soldiers in unmarked gear standing in front of a helicopter. He recognized the woman third from the left, even though she was supposed to be dead. The mission that had gone wrong, the betrayal that had cost 7 lives officially. His desk phone rang. The caller ID showed a number that shouldn't exist. "Sir," he answered. "Change of plans." General Blackthorn's voice was ice. "The Phoenix is trying to rise. Clip its wings before it burns us all. And a climax, 13. Meanwhile, Dr. Turner had stayed late in the medical center, cross-referencing the unusual scar patterns they'd observed. Their search led them down a rabbit hole of military medical databases until they found a partial match, a Jane Doe treated at a field hospital in Syria, 2019. Massive trauma burns over 30% of her body surgeries that should have taken months of recovery. But the patient had disappeared after only 2 weeks. The attached medical notes had one unusual entry. Patient exhibits unusual healing rate. Scarring consistent with experimental treatment protocols. Reference Project Lazarus. Turner's hands trembled as they reached for their personal phone. They had to contact someone from their previous posting who'd hinted at black projects and soldiers who couldn't die, at least not officially. Twist A. At 23:47 hours. The base's internal alert system triggered, but only on certain terminals. Jake's computer doctor. Turner's workstation and Lieutenant Rios's tablet all displayed the same message. Asset Phoenix confirmed. Operation Nightfall survivors converging. Prepare for contact. Jake looked out his workshop window to see a figure standing in the shadows between buildings. The silhouette raised a hand in a gesture he recognized a field signal used by special operations teams. Then, it vanished. Mini-climax, 14, and cliffhanger. The next morning's PT session started like any other until the sparring matches. Cole-breaking protocol stepped onto the mat himself. "Tran," he called out. "You've been showing off all week. Let's see how you handle someone with actual experience." The crowd of recruits formed a circle, sensing something different in the air. This wasn't normal training. Cole attacked with genuine force combat moves, not training techniques. Lynn's response was instant and brutal. They fought like two people who'd killed before, their movements carrying lethal intent, barely restrained. The impact of a particularly vicious exchange tore Lynn's PT shirt from shoulder to waist. As she spun to counter Cole's follow-up strike, the fabric fell away, revealing her back. The Phoenix tattoo was massive, and magnificent wings spread from shoulder blade to shoulder blade, rising from flames that seemed to dance down her spine. Every feather was intricately detailed, and worked into the design were 7 stars, each one containing a name too small to read from distance. The ink seemed fresh, despite obviously being years old, the colors vivid against her scarred skin. But it was Cole's reaction that silenced the entire group. His face went white as death, his hands dropping to his sides. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly before he managed to whisper, "Valentine, Phoenix 7. You're all supposed to be dead. I was at your funeral." Lynn slowly turned to face him, her torn shirt hanging loose, no longer bothering to hide what she was. Her voice carried across the silent parade ground with terrible clarity. "We were dead, Sergeant Cole, until we found out who sold us to die. Now we're back to collect what's owed in blood and truth." The morning sun caught the sweat on her Phoenix tattoo, making it seem to shimmer with life, as if the mythical bird was about to tear free from her skin and take flight. In the distance, the distinct sound of helicopters grew louder, but these weren't the regular training birds. These were coming in fast and low the way combat insertions began. Cole's hand moved to his sidearm as he backed away. "God help us all. They know you're here. Blackthorn knows you're alive." The helicopters were visible now, black birds against the morning sky, approaching with purpose. "Yes?" Lynn said, pulling her torn shirt back over her shoulders with deliberate calm. "That's exactly what we're counting on." The helicopters descended like mechanical vultures, their rotors whipping dust into a stinging cloud that forced the recruits to shield their faces. But Lynn stood motionless, her torn shirt flapping like a battle flag, eyes tracking the aircraft with predatory focus. These weren't standard UH-60 Blackhawks. The modifications were subtle, but telling electronic warfare pods, gun mounts configured for urban operations, and most damning of all, no unit markings. "Everyone into the barracks now!" Cole roared, his command voice cutting through the rotor wash. But his hand remained on his sidearm, and Lynn noticed his tactical stance had shifted. He was positioning himself between her and the incoming birds. Climax. Marcus grabbed Emma's arm, trying to pull her toward safety, but she wrenched free. "Those aren't regular army," she shouted over the noise. "Look at the approach pattern, they're setting up a capture box." She was right. The helicopters weren't landing, they were establishing a perimeter. Ropes dropped from each bird, and figures in black tactical gear fast roped down with practiced efficiency. No patches, no identification faces hidden behind ballistic masks. "Ghost protocol." Lynn muttered, her muscles coiling like springs. "They're not taking chances." Lieutenant Rios appeared at the barracks door, her service pistol drawn, but held low. "Sergeant Cole, what the hell is—" "Lieutenant, get everyone to the basement shelter." Cole interrupted, his eyes never leaving Lynn. "Training accident. Gas leak. Whatever story works." Mini-climax 2. The first wave of operators had formed a semicircle, weapons at low ready. One stepped forward, the team leader judging by the hand signals he was throwing to position his men. "Phoenix 7. His voice was modulated through the mask's speaker, but Lynn recognized the slight Brooklyn accent underneath. "By order of Joint Special Operations Command, you're to come with us. Voluntarily or otherwise." "Hello, Torres," Lynn replied calmly. "Still hiding behind that mask? Or did the burns from Mosul not heal pretty?" The team leader's head tilted, slightly surprised. His hand moved to his mask, then stopped. Mini-climax 3. Jake Moreno chose that moment to emerge from the maintenance building, but he wasn't alone. Dr. Turner flanked him, and both carried themselves differently than they had before. Weight forward, hands ready, the subtle indicators of combat training. "Phoenix 2 and 3 reporting." Jake announced, his technician slouch replaced by military bearing. "Though we've been going by different names lately." The revelation hit the watching recruits like a physical blow. Emma gasped. "You're all dead soldiers." Dr. Turner finished their medical coat, discarded, to reveal tactical clothing underneath. "Officially, anyway. Makes it easier to investigate the people who killed us when they think we're ghosts." Mini-climax 4. Torres's team shifted nervously. This was supposed to be a single target extraction, not a reunion of the unit that officially never existed. "Stand down, Torres," Lynn commanded, her voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible from someone her size. "You're about 30 seconds away from making the same mistake that got us killed the first time." "You're outnumbered 12-3, Torres countered, but uncertainty had crept into his synthesized voice. "Check your comms," Jake said with a grim smile. Torres's hand went to his earpiece. The channel was dead, nothing but static. Around the perimeter, the operators were discovering the same thing. Their electronic support helicopter, the one running communications, had gone dark. Mini-climax 5. "While you were setting up your textbook capture," Jake continued, "I was having a conversation with your birds systems. Amazing what you can do with the right frequency modulation and about 5 years of anger-driven preparation." Inside the downed support helicopter, the pilots were frantically trying to restart systems that had been surgically disabled. Every screen displayed the same message: "The dead don't forget." Phoenix. Cole made a decision. He drew his pistol and aimed it at Torres. "Everyone needs to calm the fuck down before this goes sideways." "Cole, you're interfering with a sanctioned operation," Torres warned. "Sanctioned by who?" Cole shot back. "Because I just got off the phone with the base commander and he doesn't know anything about black helicopters landing on his installation." Mini-climax. 6. The morning sun had climbed higher, and with it came unexpected visitors. 3 news vans had somehow made it to the base's outer fence cameras already rolling. The distinctive sound of social media notifications began pinging from various phones as live streams went viral. Military standoff at Fort Ridgeline. That would be my contribution, Dr. Turner said mildly. Amazing how fast media responds to tips about rogue military units attacking training bases, especially when those tips come with authenticated video. Torres's body language shifted to barely controlled rage. You have no idea what you're destroying here. Years of careful operations, years of selling out American soldiers for profit. Lynn cut him off. Operation Nightfall wasn't a failed mission, Torres. It was a transaction. We were the merchandise. Mini-climax. 7. A new voice crackled through the base's PA system. General Morrison, the installation commander, had reached his command center. All unauthorized personnel on this installation have 10 seconds to lay down weapons before I authorize deadly force. This is your only warning. The sound of armored vehicles rumbled from multiple directions. The base's actual security forces were responding, and they significantly outnumbered Torres's team. You can't stop this, Torres said, but his men were already lowering their weapons caught between 2 forces. Blackthorn has resources you can't imagine. Blackthorn's been under DOJ surveillance for 6 months. Lieutenant Rios announced, surprising everyone. Did you think you were the only ones investigating Nightfall? Some of us still believe in justice through proper channels. Twist A. The revelation that Rios was more than just a training observer changed the entire dynamic. She pulled out her actual credentials, Defense Intelligence Agency. We've been building a case, but we needed proof of the conspiracy, she continued. Living witnesses the defense couldn't dismiss as fabricated. Mini-climax. 8. Torres made his choice. He reached for his mask, pulling it off to reveal a face marked by burn scars, but also by guilt. You want to know the truth? Fine. We're all dead men anyway once this goes public. His scarred features twisted with self-loathing. Nightfall was supposed to be a capture mission, high-value target in Syria, but the intel was deliberately falsified. You were sold to ISIS for $20 million and a promise of future cooperation. Blackthorn needed funding for his off-books operations. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the helicopter rotors seemed to quiet. Who else? Lynn's voice was deadly calm. The network goes up to Pentagon levels, Torres admitted. Deputy Secretary Coleman, General Martinez from JSOC, 6 others. They've been selling operations for years. Nightfall was just the one that went wrong. You weren't supposed to survive long enough to be rescued. Tamta. Mini-climax. 9. Emma Chen, who'd been recording everything on her phone, suddenly shouted, "Behind you!" 3 more operators had circled around during the conversation, approaching from the barracks' blind spot, but they hadn't counted on the recruits. Marcus, his earlier antagonism forgotten, grabbed a training pugil stick and clotheslined the first operator. Other recruits following his lead swarmed the remaining 2. "Protect them!" Marcus roared, pointing at Lynn's team. "They're the good guys." The sight of barely trained recruits defending supposed dead soldiers against black ops teams would have been absurd if it weren't so desperate. Climax. 10. Cole made another decision. He pulled out a satellite phone, not standard issue, and hit a preset number. Valhalla. Actual, this is Gatekeeper. The Phoenixes are rising and the Hunters are here. Authorization code Lazarus 77 Alpha. The response was immediate. Understood. Cavalry inbound. 5 mics. He looked at Lynn. Not everyone forgot what you did for this country. Some of us have been waiting for you to come back from the dead. Before she could respond, gunfire erupted from the eastern perimeter. Not the controlled bursts of professional soldiers, but panicked shooting. Torres's men were engaging something or someone. Climax 11. Through the smoke and chaos, a figure emerged, small, lethal, moving with inhuman grace. The fourth Phoenix. Maria Santos, who'd been listed as MIA, presumed dead, had arrived. She carved through the perimeter like a scalpel, non-lethally neutralizing operators with surgical precision. "Miss me?" she called out, her voice carrying a Portuguese accent thick with amusement. "Sorry I'm late. I was following the money trail. You'll never guess where it leads." She tossed a tablet to Lynn, its screen, showing bank records, classified communications, and most damning photographs of American soldiers being handed over to enemy forces with Blackthorne himself supervising. Climax 12. Torres's remaining men had formed a defensive position, but their hearts weren't in it. These were soldiers who'd followed orders believing they were patriots. Learning they'd been enforcement for traitors was breaking them in real time. "Stand down," Torres ordered his men. "It's over." But one operator didn't lower his weapon. Instead, he turned it on Torres. "Can't have witnesses, Sergeant. Blackthorne's orders." The shot was impossibly fast, but Lynn was faster. She'd been moving before the operator's finger tightened on the trigger, her thrown knife catching him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Torres dropped wounded but alive Dr. Turner, already rushing to provide medical aid. Mini-climax 13. The base alarm system activated not the routine drill sound, but the piercing wail of actual lockdown. Every building sealed, blast doors dropping, turning Fort Ridgeline into a fortress. "That's not us," Morrison's voice crackled over the PA. "Someone's activated emergency protocols. We're locked in." Jake was already on his tablet, fingers flying. "It's remote access. Someone's taking control of base systems. Shit, they're trying to scrub the surveillance footage." "Not someone," Lynn said grimly. "Blackthorne. He's cutting losses. Probably has a cleanup crew en route." Twist B. The revelation came from an unexpected source. Cole's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. He read it, his face paling. "Blackthorne's not coming to clean up. He's already here. Has been for 3 days running an inspection. He's in the command bunker with Morrison." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The base commander was a hostage, and Blackthorne had control of a fortified position with access to every system on the installation. To Climax 14. "We need to move," Lynn announced, already strategizing. "Jake, can you—" "Already on it," he interrupted, his fingers never stopping. "But I need to be hardwired into the mainframe, the communication hub in Building 7. "That's across open ground," Cole pointed out. "With the lockdown, automated defenses will target anyone moving between buildings." "Not if they're busy targeting something else," Maria said with a predatory grin. She produced a handful of small devices from her tactical vest. "Drone swarm. They'll think it's an air assault and focus on the sky." Mini-climax 15. As they prepared to move, Emma approached with several recruits. "We're coming with you." "This isn't training," Cole started. "No," Marcus interrupted, stepping forward. "But these people were sold out by their own country and still came back to fix it. We're soldiers, or trying to be. This is what we signed up for." The group of recruits had grown 20-30 more, joining every second. They were untrained, untested, but they understood honor in a way that Blackthorne never could. Dr. Turner quickly distributed basic medical supplies. "Stay behind cover, move in groups, watch each other's backs. You might be recruits, but today you're going to learn what real soldiers do: protect the innocent, and stop the guilty's." Mini-climax 16 and cliffhanger. Maria's drones launched simultaneously, filling the sky with buzzing targets. The automated defenses responded immediately, tracers lighting up the morning air. Under this cover, 3 teams sprinted across the open ground, Lynn leading one to the command bunker, Jake heading for the communication hub, and Dr. Turner establishing a medical station with recruit volunteers. They were halfway across when Lynn's earpiece, one of Jake's encrypted units, crackled with a familiar voice that made her blood freeze. "Hello, Phoenix 7, Blackthorn said conversationally. "Or should I still call you Captain Tran? I have to admit, staying dead for 5 years just to expose me shows dedication. Pointless dedication, but impressive nonetheless." "It's over, Blackthorn," Lynn responded, still running. "The evidence is already uploaded. Media, DOJ, everyone knows." "Do they check the news feeds?" Jake's voice cut in, panicked. "He's right. Everything's being blocked. Military information, blackout protocols. Nothing's getting out of this base." Blackthorn's laugh was cold. "You forgot, Captain. I wrote those protocols. Fort Ridgeline is now a black site. No communications in or out. And in about 15 minutes, a training accident will tragically claim the lives of everyone present. Chemical spill, perhaps, or a live fire exercise gone wrong. I haven't decided yet." The command bunker loomed ahead, a concrete monument to paranoia and protection. Through the reinforced windows, they could see Blackthorn standing over Morrison, who was zip-tied to a chair. "Come on in, Captain," Blackthorn continued. "Let's finish what we started 5 years ago, but this time I'll make sure you stay dead." The blast doors of the bunker began to open, revealing a kill box, narrow entrance, no cover, and Blackthorn's personal security team waiting inside with weapons trained. Behind them, the morning sky had turned dark with smoke from the defensive fire. The recruits were pinned down. Torres was bleeding out despite Turner's efforts, and somewhere in the chaos, more helicopters were approaching, but whose side they were on was anyone's guess. Lynn looked at her team, then at the young recruits who'd chosen to stand with them. The Phoenix tattoo on her back seemed to burn beneath her torn shirt. "Phoenix rises," she said quietly, then louder for everyone to hear. "Phoenix rises!" The battle cry was picked up by dozens of voices as Captain Linh Tran, officially dead for 5 years, charged into the bunker to face the man who'd murdered her entire unit. The trap was sprung, but sometimes the best way out of a trap is straight through its teeth. The bunker's entrance was a death funnel, exactly as Blackthorn had designed it, but Lynn didn't charge straight in. That was what he expected. Instead, she dove left at the last second, using the doorframe's blind spot, while Maria went right. The crossfire from Blackthorn's security team shredded the air where they should have been mini-climax. 1. "Flash out!" Maria shouted, and 3 grenades rolled across the bunker floor. Not fragmentation flashbangs mixed with smoke. The confined space amplified their effect tenfold. Blackthorn's men, despite their tactical gear, were momentarily disoriented. In that chaos, Lynn moved like liquid shadow. She disarmed the first guard with a joint lock that sent his weapon spinning, then used his body as a shield against his partner's reflexive fire. Her elbow found his solar plexus, dropping him without killing him. These were soldiers following orders, not the true enemy. "Morrison's hit!" Cole's voice crackled through comms as he entered behind them, having ignored his own advice about staying clear. The base commander was slumped in his chair, blood spreading across his uniform. Acts 2. Dr. Turner's voice cut through the tactical net. 30 seconds. Get him to me in 30 seconds or he's gone." But Blackthorn had retreated deeper into the bunker toward the command center's core. "You always were too soft, Tran," his voice echoed through the smoke. "Could have killed those men, should have, tactically speaking." That's the difference between us, Lin replied, advancing carefully. I'm a soldier. You're just a murderer with stars on his collar. The smoke began to clear, revealing the command center's main room banks of monitors, control stations, and Blackthorn standing beside a console with his hand hovering over a red-bordered panel. Base self-destruct, Lin asked calmly. That's a bit dramatic, even for you. Not destruct, Blackthorn smiled coldly. Purge protocols. Every piece of evidence on this base, every file, every byte of data gone, including the only copies of certain classified operations that would exonerate your team posthumously. Many climax. 3. Jake's voice burst through comms. I'm in the system. He's not lying. Purge protocols will wipe everything, including backups. But I need 2 minutes to create a mirror. 2 minutes? You don't have 2 seconds. Blackthorn said, his finger moving toward the button. The knife appeared in his shoulder before anyone saw Lin throw it. Not a killing blow, precisely placed to disable his arm. He screamed, stumbling back from the console. I spent 5 years dead, General, Lin said, advancing on him. 5 years letting everyone I loved think I was gone. You know what I learned? Death is patient. It can wait 2 more minutes. Climax 4. Outside the bunker, the situation was deteriorating. The recruits had formed a defensive perimeter, but they were taking fire from an unknown source, snipers positioned in the training towers. Southeast Tower, 2 shooters. Emma called out, her mother's intelligence training serving her well. Northwest has at least 1. Marcus had found an M4 somewhere and was returning fire with surprising accuracy. These aren't base security, different gear, different tactics. He was right. These were Blackthorn's cleanup crew, the insurance policy he'd positioned before revealing himself. Mini-climax 5. In the communication hub, Jake's fingers flew across keyboards while bullets sparked off the reinforced windows. Come on. Got it. Mirror established, but shit, there's more here than just Nightfall. Operations going back 15 years. Hundreds of missions, thousands of soldiers. Upload everything, Lin ordered through comms. The whole truth. To where he's right about the blackout. Everywhere, Maria interrupted, appearing beside him with a satellite uplink she'd somehow acquired. This little beauty has a direct connection to 7 different intelligence agencies, courtesy of our friends at DIA. Lieutenant Rios's voice confirmed. Authentication codes verified. Upload authorized. Let's burn this conspiracy to the ground. Mini-climax 6. Back in the bunker, Blackthorn had pulled the knife from his shoulder with his left hand, his right arm hanging useless. You have no idea what you're destroying. The operations I ran kept this country safe. Safe. Lin's voice was ice. You sold my unit to terrorists. Rivera died screaming. Chen lasted 3 days under torture before his heart gave out. Santos. She gestured to Maria, who'd returned, barely survived the execution attempt. Acceptable losses for the greater. Cole's fist connected with Blackthorn's jaw before he could finish. With respect, General, shut the fuck up. Climax 7. Torres's voice crackled through comms, weak but determined. Phoenix 7 Torres here. I'm uploading my files too. Every order, every communication. I kept it all. Insurance policy. Why? Lin asked, genuinely surprised. Because I knew this day would come. When the dead started walking, I'd need to choose a side. I choose yours. Dr. Turner's voice cut in. Morrison's stable. But we have another problem. Thermal imaging shows vehicles approaching. Military convoy, but not ours. Twist A. The main screen in the command center flickered to life, showing a stern face that made everyone freeze. General Patricia Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Blackthorn, she said coldly. You are relieved of command and under arrest for treason. Captain Tran. I'm sorry we're 5 years late, but better late than never. You knew, Lin demanded. Suspected. But suspicion isn't proof. We needed you alive, needed you to draw them out. Phoenix Initiative was never just your unit's designation. It was the contingency plan if you survived. Climax 8. Blackthorn laughed, blood running from his split lip. You think you've won? Half of Washington is implicated in these files. You'll tear the entire defense establishment apart. Good, Hayes replied flatly. It needs tearing. Captain Tran, would you do the honors? Lynn approached Blackthorn, pulling zip cuffs from her tactical belt. General Marcus Blackthorn, you're under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and violation of your oath as an officer. You can't prove... Actually, Jake's voice interrupted. I can. Every communication, every transaction, every order, including the recording of you ordering the Nightfall betrayal. You really should have been more careful with your digital footprint. Mini-climax 9. The bunker doors burst open. Military police flooded in, but not alone FBI agents, DOJ officials, even CIA personnel. The conspiracy's exposure had triggered responses from every agency. But Blackthorn wasn't finished. As they cuffed him, he leaned close to Lynn. You think this ends with me? Check your 6th captain. The Phoenix isn't the only thing that can rise from ashes. Before she could respond, an explosion rocked the base. Not the bunker, the communication hub. Jake! Lynn screamed into comms. Climax 10. I'm okay, Jake's voice came back, coughing. But someone just tried to take out the evidence. Backup servers are gone. But the upload completed 10 seconds before the blast, Maria reported. Everything's out there, every dirty secret. Through the bunker's windows, they could see news helicopters circling the base, despite the no-fly zone. The media blackout had failed. Someone on the inside had lifted it. Emma appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. The recruits' live streams just went viral. 14 million views and climbing. The whole world's watching. Climax 11. Cole helped Morrison to his feet. The base commander weak but conscious. Captain Tran, Morrison said formally. I hereby reinstate you to active duty, posthumous status notwithstanding. Sir, technically, you're a hero who's been dead for 5 years. We'll sort out the paperwork later. Right now, I need every loyal soldier I can get. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. The snipers in the towers had surrendered, seeing the overwhelming federal response. Climax 12. Dr. Turner was treating Torres, whose testimony was being recorded by federal agents, even as they worked to save his life. There's more, Torres gasped. Blackthorn has a failsafe. If he doesn't check in every 48 hours? What kind of failsafe? Rios demanded. Sleeper cells. Former special ops thinking they're still serving their country. They have targeting packages on every Phoenix survivor and anyone who helped them. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Maria checked her weapon. How many? 12 teams. Maybe more. Mini-climax 13. General Hayes' image on the screen hadn't moved. Captain Tran, we need those cells identified and neutralized. You know Blackthorn's methods better than anyone. I need my full team, Lynn replied. All 7 of us. 7. Our records show... Check again, ma'am. Phoenix 7 had 8 members. 1's still MIA. Jake pulled up a file on his tablet showing a redacted profile. Staff Sergeant David Kim, explosives expert. Last seen during the Nightfall ambush. He's alive, Lynn said with certainty. Blackthorn wouldn't have been so confident unless he had leverage. Kim's his ace. Twist. B. Marcus approached, still carrying the M4 he'd appropriated. Captain, the recruits want to help. We're not trained for this, but... You defended this position against a superior force, Lynn interrupted. You made a choice when it mattered. That's not training, that's character. She turned to Cole. Sergeant, I need you to fast-track their training. Real combat prep, not basic. That's against regulations. So was selling soldiers to terrorists. Morrison cut in. Do it, Cole. New world, new rules. Climax 14. The federal agents were escorting Blackthorn out when he stopped looking directly at a security camera. Activate Prometheus, he said clearly. Nothing happened immediately, but Jake's equipment started screaming alerts. Oh shit. Oh shit. He just triggered something in the Pentagon servers. It's spreading some kind of virus or not a virus. Blackthorn smiled as they dragged him away. Just a little insurance. Every classified file about Phoenix Initiative is being transmitted. Not to enemies, to our allies. Let's see how NATO feels about America's dirty laundry. Mini-climax 15. And cliffhanger. Lynn stood in the ruins of everything she'd planned for 5 years. The conspiracy was exposed, Blackthorn was arrested, but the victory felt hollow. The implications of what they'd uncovered would shake the entire military establishment. Captain, Emma approached hesitantly, holding out a tablet. You need to see this. The screen showed a video message recorded recently. A man's face appeared Asian features, early 30s eyes that had seen too much. David Kim, Phoenix 8, alive, but scarred. If you're seeing this, it means Blackthorn's been compromised, Kim said in the recording. I've been undercover in his network for 3 years, feeding intel to someone you need to meet. The real puppet master isn't Blackthorn. He's middle management. The Prometheus protocol he just triggered. It's not about embarrassing America. It's about triggering Article 5 responses that will start World War III. You have less than 72 hours to stop it. The video continued. I'm embedded with the primary strike team. They're targeting the G7 summit tomorrow. 7 world leaders, 1 location, and enough evidence to make it look like a Phoenix operation. Your resurrection is about to be blamed for the apocalypse. The screen went dark, then displayed coordinates, Munich, Germany. Lynn looked at her team, at the recruits who'd become soldiers in a morning, at the federal agents still processing the scene. The Phoenix tattoo on her back seemed to pulse with renewed purpose. Pack light, she announced to her team. We're going to Germany, and this time we're not dying for anyone's lies. Maria was already checking ammunition. Jake pulled up satellite imagery of Munich. Dr. Turner prepared medical supplies. And somewhere in the chaos, Cole muttered, "So much for retirement." The war against Blackthorn was won, but the battle for Phoenix's honor and the world's survival had just begun. 72 hours to prevent a global catastrophe with dead soldiers who couldn't officially exist, racing against a conspiracy that had just evolved from treason to apocalypse. Morrison grabbed the base intercom. All personnel, this is the commander. Fort Ridgeline is now under martial law. Anyone who wants to volunteer for an unsanctioned, probably illegal, definitely suicidal mission to save the world, report to Hangar 7 in 15 minutes. The response was immediate. Dozens of recruits, support staff, even some of Blackthorn's captured security teams stepped forward. The Phoenix had risen, and it had awakened something in everyone who witnessed it, the understanding that sometimes the right thing to do is exactly what the rules say you can't. Hangar 7 transformed into organized chaos within minutes. C-130, Hercules sat on the tarmac, its cargo hold open like a mouth ready to swallow whatever desperate plan they could cobble together. Lynn stood at a makeshift command table. Satellite imagery of Munich spread before her, while volunteers streamed in, not just recruits, but mechanics, cooks, even the base chaplain. Climax 1. We can't take civilians, Cole protested, but his heart wasn't in it. He was already calculating loadouts and logistics. They stopped being civilians when they stood against Blackthorn's men, Lynn replied, tracing routes on the map. Besides, we need every asset. This isn't a military operation anymore. It's a rescue mission for the entire world. General Hayes appeared on the secure tablet Jake had rigged. Captain, officially, this conversation isn't happening. Unofficially, there's a KC-135 tanker that will mysteriously develop navigation problems over the Atlantic. You'll have fuel. And when we land in Munich, you won't. German airspace is locked down for the G7. You'll have to jump. Mini-climax 2. Marcus stepped forward, his young face pale but determined. Captain, I've never jumped from a plane. You've got 6 hours to learn, Maria said, already pulling parachute rigs from storage. Crash course emphasis on avoiding the crash. Emma was working with Jake on something involving multiple laptops and cables that looked like electronic spaghetti. If Kim's right about them framing Phoenix, they'll have digital evidence ready to upload the moment the attack happens. So we need counter-evidence, Jake muttered, fingers flying across keyboards. Every Phoenix member's biometric data for the last 72 hours, proving you couldn't be in Munich. Except we're about to be in Munich, Turner pointed out. Not officially. According to these records, we're all in medical isolation at Fort Ridgeline. Food poisoning from the mess hall. Very tragic, very documented. Climax 3. Torres, despite his wounds, had dragged himself to the hangar in a wheelchair. You need someone who knows Blackthorn's protocols. I'm coming. You can barely stand, Turner protested. I can sit in a plane. And I know every code word, every dead drop, every emergency protocol he ever created. He pulled a blood-stained notebook from his jacket, including the ones he thought I didn't know about. Lynn studied him for a long moment. The moment we land, you're a dead man if his people spot you. I've been dead since I chose to follow illegal orders. At least now I can die for something worth it. Climax. 4. A commotion at the hangar entrance drew attention. Lieutenant Rios had returned, but not alone. 6 individuals in civilian clothes but with military bearings stood behind her. Delta Force recently retired, she announced. They heard about Phoenix Rising. They want in. The lead operator, a mountain of a man with graying temples, stepped forward. Master Sergeant Thompson, we worked support for your unit once, Captain Tran, in Kandahar 2018. Lynn's eyes widened with recognition. You're the ones who held the extraction point when everything went sideways. For 14 hours, Thompson confirmed. Phoenix saved my squad leader's kid in an earlier op. Debts matter. Mini-climax 5. The manifest was growing beyond any reasonable operation. 47 volunteers, limited equipment, and a ticking clock. But Lynn had learned something in her 5 years of death. Sometimes chaos was better than planning. Listen up, she called out, and the hangar fell silent. In 60 minutes we board. This isn't sanctioned, it isn't legal, and it probably won't work. Anyone who wants out, leave now. Nobody moved. Good. Here's what we know. 7 world leaders will be targeted in a way that makes Phoenix look responsible. We stop it or World War III starts with our names as the cause. Mini-climax 6. Jake suddenly jerked back from his computer. Incoming message. It's from Kim. The screen displayed text. Prometheus active. Strike team moving. Summit security compromised from inside. Trust no one in uniform. He's warning us that Summit security has been infiltrated, Lynn interpreted. We'll be fighting both the terrorists and the people supposed to be protecting the leaders. How do we identify the real security from the compromised ones? Cole asked. We don't, Maria said grimly. We assume everyone's hostile until proven otherwise. Twist. A Morrison arrived, but his expression was grim. We have a problem. Blackthorn's lawyer just filed an emergency injunction. Any military action by Phoenix members will be considered proof of guilt in the conspiracy. They're trying to legally prevent us from stopping the attack, Rios realized. Worse, Morrison continued. If you act and fail, it legitimizes everything Blackthorn accused you of. Phoenix becomes the villain in the story. And if we don't act, millions die in the war that follows? Lynn said quietly. Not much of a choice. Benny Climax 7. Tuan. Turner had been quiet, working on something with the medical supplies. They finally looked up. I've been analyzing the pattern of Blackthorn's operations. Everyone had a biological component, diseases, toxins, chemical weapons. This won't just be bullets and bombs. You think they'll use a bioweapon at the summit? I think they'll use something that can be blamed on Phoenix's supposed international connections, something that screams revenge rather than terrorism. Emma, who'd been listening, suddenly went pale. The water supply. Every G7 summit has a single secured water source for the leaders. If they contaminate that, 7 dead world leaders all drinking from the same poisoned well, Jake finished, and Phoenix gets blamed for the assassination of the century. Mini-climax 8. The clock on the wall showed 43 minutes until departure, when alarms began wailing. Not the base alarms, Jake's equipment was screaming alerts. "Cyber attack," he shouted. "Someone's trying to access the Phoenix files we uploaded. They're not stealing them, they're altering them." On-screen documents began changing in real time. Service records showing Phoenix members in Munich 2 days ago. Financial records indicating payments from terrorist organizations. Photos being digitally altered to place them at planning meetings they'd never attended. "Cut the connection," Lynn ordered. "I can't. It's not coming through our systems. They're changing the copies that already went to other agencies. We're being framed in real time. Mini-climax 9. Maria grabbed her gear. "We need to move now. Every second we wait, the frame job gets tighter." But Cole was staring at his phone, face white. "Captain, the news. It's already starting." CNN's breaking news banner read, "Terrorist plot uncovered. Rogue military unit Phoenix planning G7 attack." The hangar erupted in shocked voices. Their own operation was being reported before they'd even left. "They knew," Torres said quietly. "Blackthorn knew we'd try to stop it. This was always the plan, use our response as proof of guilt." Mini-climax 10. General Hayes's image reappeared on the tablet, her expression carved from stone. "Captain Tran, I'm being ordered to arrest you and your entire team. You have 5 minutes before military police surround that hangar." "General, I said you have 5 minutes. Unfortunately, I'm in a Pentagon elevator that's about to mysteriously lose signal for exactly 5 minutes and 30 seconds. The screen went dark. Lynn turned to the assembled volunteers. "Anyone who stays is now officially a fugitive. Last chance to walk away." Marcus was the first to respond, loading his gear onto the plane. "With respect, Captain, shut up and let's go save the world." Mini-climax 11. The C-130's engines roared to life. In the cockpit, the pilot, a grizzled veteran named Walsh, who'd supposedly retired 3 years ago, gave a thumbs up. "Tower's ordering us to stand down. Shame my radio just broke." The cargo door was closing when headlights blazed across the tarmac. Military police vehicles racing toward them. But they stopped at the hangar's edge, and Cole realized why the base's junior, enlisted the ones who'd witnessed everything, had formed a human chain blocking the MP's path. "Sir, we can't get through without running them over," an MP sergeant reported over radio. The delay was all they needed. The C-130 lurched forward, gathering speed. Mini-climax 12. As they lifted off, Lynn stood in the cargo hold, addressing her improvised army. We'll hit German airspace in 7 hours, 3 hours to the drop zone. That gives us 10 hours to plan an operation that should take 10 weeks. What's the actual plan? Thompson asked. We don't stop the attack, that's what they expect. We expose it as it happens. Make it impossible to blame Phoenix because the whole world will be watching the real perpetrators. Live stream the counter-operation, Emma realized. Make it so public that no amount of digital manipulation can hide the truth. Twist B. Jake, still working on his equipment, suddenly froze. Oh God, I know how they're going to do it. Everyone turned to him. The summit's using a new security system, all digital, all connected. Facial recognition, automated responses, the works. If someone could hack it, they could lock down the entire summit with the leaders inside. Lynn finished. Then release whatever bioweapon they've prepared. The security system becomes the murder weapon. And only someone with the highest clearance could hack it, Torres added. Someone like a Pentagon general. Even in custody, Blackthorn's authorization codes are still valid for another. He checked his watch, 18 hours. Mini-climax, 13. Dr. Turner had been examining medical data on their tablet. I found it. 3 days ago, a shipment of medical supplies to the summit was logged. Standard stuff, except for one item, concentrated insulin. Enough to kill 100 people if administered incorrectly. Insulin? Cole asked. That's not exactly a bioweapon. It is if you aerosol it, Turner explained. Massive hypoglycemic shock. Looks like a natural event, all 7 leaders mysteriously developing diabetes complications simultaneously. By the time anyone figures out it was induced, Phoenix will already be blamed. Can you create an antidote? Not an antidote, but I can create something that will make the attack obvious. A marker that will show up in blood tests proving external introduction. Mini-climax, 14. The plane hit turbulence, or so Walsh claimed. But Lynn saw his hands fighting the controls. Someone's trying to override our navigation remotely. Jake was already on it, laptop connected to the plane's systems. Military override codes, they're trying to turn us around. Can you stop it? I can delay it. But we're flying a U.S. military aircraft that's about to enter Allied airspace without authorization. The moment we cross into Germany, we're either getting shot down or forced to land. Maria studied the map. Unless we're not in a military aircraft when we cross. Everyone stared at her. We jump early, over France, make our way to Munich by ground. That's 300 miles. In 10 hours, she smiled. I've done worse with less. Mini-climax, 15. And cliffhanger. Lynn was about to respond when her satellite phone one Jake had encrypted beyond any reasonable standard rang. Only 3 people had this number, and 2 were on the plane. Captain Tran, she answered. Hello, 7. The voice was tired, strained, but unmistakably David Kim. Change of plans. They moved the timeline. The attack happens in 6 hours, not tomorrow. The cargo hold went silent, except for the engine roar. That's impossible. The summit doesn't start until emergency session, called 5 minutes ago. Security concerns about the Phoenix threat. They're walking into the trap right now. Lynn looked at the altimeter, at her team, at the recruits who'd trusted her with their lives. They were still 4 hours from the drop zone, with another 2 hours minimum to reach Munich. Kim, we can't make it in time. You can if you drop now. I've arranged ground transport. French resistance, you might say some friends who remember what Phoenix did for their unit in Mali. And the German Air Force. We'll be very busy in about 60 seconds. Someone's about to report a bomb threat at Berlin-Brandenburg. All fighters redirecting. Lynn realized what he was saying. You're burning your cover. They'll know you're alive. I've been dead for 5 years too, Captain. Time to rise. The line went dead. Lynn looked at her people, soldiers, recruits, volunteers, patriots, all. "Rig for combat jump," she commanded. "We go in 5 minutes." As parachutes were frantically distributed and checked, Emma asked the question everyone was thinking. "Captain, even if we make it, how do we stop an attack at the most secure location on Earth with 47 people, half of whom have never seen combat?" Lynn strapped on her chute, checking the phoenix tattoo on her back was covered. It would be needed for identification later. "We don't stop it, Emma. We make sure the whole world sees who's really behind it. Sometimes the truth is the deadliest weapon." The cargo door opened to rushing wind and the dark expanse of France below. 300 miles to Munich. 6 hours to prevent a war. And somewhere down there, David Kim was risking everything to give them a chance. "Phoenix rises," Lynn shouted over the wind. "Phoenix rises!" 46 voices answered. And then they jumped into the night, dead soldiers and living volunteers, falling toward a date with destiny that would determine whether Phoenix was remembered as heroes or history's greatest villains. The French countryside rushed up at them through the darkness, a patchwork of fields barely visible in the moonlight. Lynn's altimeter screamed warnings as she pulled her chute at the last possible second, the jolt nearly tearing her shoulders from their sockets. Around her, 46 parachutes bloomed like deadly flowers against the night sky. Marcus hit hard, his inexperience showing, as he rolled wrong and came up limping. Emma landed in a tree, cursing creatively as she cut herself free. But they all made it down alive, a minor miracle, given half had learned to jump just hours ago. "Rally point 2 clicks northeast," Lynn commanded through comms already moving. They had minutes before French authorities responded to reports of mass parachute drops. The promised transport was waiting a convoy of unmarked trucks, driven by hard-faced men and women who asked no questions. The lead driver, a scarred woman with Algerian features, simply said, "Phoenix saved my brother in Mali. We remember our debts." They drove in tense silence, the trucks pushing dangerous speeds through back roads. Jake worked frantically on his equipment in the back of one vehicle, trying to establish connection with Kim. "Nothing. He's gone dark." "Or they got him," Torres said quietly from his stretcher. Despite his wounds, he'd insisted on jumping, though the landing had reopened several injuries Turner was now treating. "He's alive," Lynn stated with certainty. "David Kim doesn't die easily. Trust me, I've seen him try." The convoy stopped suddenly. Through the windshield, they could see the roadblock German federal police checking every vehicle. The summit security had expanded its perimeter. "We go around," the driver said, but Lynn was already seeing the problem. 3 more roadblocks were visible on parallel routes. "No time," she decided. "We go through." Thompson's Delta team took point, their experience showing as they moved through the darkness like ghosts. The German officers never saw them coming unconscious before they could radio an alarm zip-tied and left in the drainage ditch. 5 hours, Jake announced. "Summit's already in emergency session." They abandoned the trucks 2 miles from Munich's convention center, moving on foot through industrial districts and back alleys. The city was in lockdown, helicopters circling overhead, but that worked both ways. The heavy security presence made their armed group less conspicuous among the various tactical teams. Maria suddenly held up a fist movement ahead. A figure stepped from the shadows, and Lynn's heart stopped. David Kim stood before them, thinner than she remembered, new scars mapping stories across his face, but unmistakably alive. "Took you long enough," he said with a ghost of his old smile. "The summit's sealed. No one in or out. But there's a maintenance tunnel that isn't on any schematic." "Because you added it," Lynn guessed. 3 years of preparation for this moment. I knew Blackthorne would eventually overplay his hand. They followed him through a maze of service corridors and forgotten Cold War-era passages beneath Munich. The sound of the summit grew louder. Media crowds, security chatter, the hum of a world event, unaware it was about to become a massacre. "The insulin weapon is already in the ventilation system," Kim explained as they moved. "Remote triggered. The moment someone enters the main hall with Phoenix credentials, it deploys." "Phoenix credentials?" Cole asked. "Blackthorn had fake IDs made. High-level clearance. The attack will look like we walked in and committed mass murder." Emma had been filming everything on her phone, but suddenly stopped. "No signal. They're jamming everything." "Not everything," Jake said, pulling out a device that looked like it was held together with tape and hope. "Satellite uplink bounced through 7 proxies. We can broadcast, but only once, before they trace it." They reached a sealed door marked with radiation warnings in 3 languages. Kim input a long code, and it opened to reveal the convention center's sub-basement. Above them, through the ceiling, they could hear voices world leaders discussing the Phoenix threat. Turner had been working with their medical supplies, creating a chemical compound that would react with aerosolized insulin, making it visible. "If we can introduce this into the air system first, the attack becomes obvious purple smoke instead of invisible death. But we need to be in the main hall for that," Lynn realized, "where the bioweapon triggers the moment we enter." "Unless," Maria said slowly, "we're already inside when it triggers." The plan formed quickly, desperately. Half the team would enter through the maintenance tunnel before the fake Phoenix members arrived. The other half would confront the attack team, directly exposing them before they could escape. Torres, despite his injuries, insisted on a crucial role. "I know Blackthorn's abort codes. If things go wrong, I can stop the deployment, but only from the main security station." "That's a suicide mission," Turner protested. "The moment you enter, they'll know you're there." "Then I'll make it count." Kim led them through the final approach. The main hall was visible through ventilation grates, 7 world leaders seated around a conference table discussing enhanced security measures against the Phoenix threat. The irony was suffocating. "Movement," Thompson whispered. "Main entrance. Security team, but wrong formation." Through the grates, they watched 6 figures in summit security uniforms enter. Their faces were obscured by tactical helmets, but their movement was wrong, too aggressive, too purposeful. "The attack team," Lynn confirmed, "using the stolen credentials." One figure stepped forward, reaching for what looked like a security scanner, but was actually the trigger device. In seconds, the insulin weapon would deploy, and 7 world leaders would die gasping, while Phoenix took the blame. "Now," Lynn commanded. The grates exploded outward as Phoenix team burst into the hall. Turner's compound was already dispersing, turning the air a vivid purple. The insulin weapon deployed simultaneously, but instead of invisible death, it created a purple cloud that made the attack undeniable. The fake security team reacted instantly, weapons rising, but they hadn't expected resistance from inside. Maria's team hit them from behind, having entered through the main doors moments after them. "Don't move!" Lynn shouted at the world leaders who sat frozen in shock. "We're here to save your lives." The German chancellor started to speak, but Emma had Jake's uplink running, broadcasting everything live to the world. "This is Phoenix team. We're stopping an attack on the G7 summit. The purple smoke is marking a bioweapon meant to kill everyone here." The fake security team tried to flee, but found Thompson's Delta operators blocking every exit. The lead attacker pulled off his helmet in frustration, revealing a face Lynn recognized from Blackthorn's files. Colonel Marcus Webb, supposedly killed in Afghanistan 3 years ago. "More dead soldiers," she said bitterly. "How many of us did Blackthorn fake kill to build his private army?" "Enough," Webb replied, raising his weapon. The gunfight was brief, but vicious. In the confined space, every shot was dangerous. Marcus threw himself over the French president as bullets flew. Cole and the recruits formed a protective barrier around the leaders, while Phoenix engaged the attackers. Kim had vanished during the chaos, but his voice crackled through comms. Main security responding, 60 seconds. Torres now would be good, Lynn called out. From the security station, Torres's voice came through. Strained, abort code entered, ventilation clearing. But Lynn, I can see the backup plan. They've got explosives throughout the building. Remote triggered. No, dead man's switch. Webb's wearing it. Lynn turned to see Webb smiling coldly, his hand on a device strapped to his chest. Phoenix rises. Phoenix burns. We all die together and you still get blamed. The world leaders were being evacuated, but they wouldn't clear the building in time. The purple smoke was dissipating, but the threat remained. How much explosive? Thompson asked. Enough to level the building, Torres reported. 30 seconds to minimum safe distance, but Webb just has to let go. Lynn made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She lowered her weapon and approached Webb slowly. I know you, she said quietly. You were at Firebase Bravo. Your unit got hit by insurgents using intel that shouldn't have existed. Webb's smile faltered. Blackthorn said it was necessary. Acceptable losses. He told us the same thing. Then he sold us to die. How many operations, Webb? How many soldiers did he sacrifice for his agenda? Shut up. Your dead man's switch requires pressure, not release. Kim's voice cut in. I designed it. You have to actively trigger it, not just let go. You're not a suicide bomber, Webb. You're a soldier who got used. Webb looked down at the device, realization dawning. He lied. He said, he lies about everything, Lynn said gently. But you can choose truth. Help us expose all of it. The moment stretched endlessly. Then Webb slowly removed his hand from the device, which didn't explode. He pulled it off and set it carefully on the ground. I have names, he said, his voice breaking. Dates, operations, everything Blackthorn made us do. The summit security finally burst in to find the crisis already resolved. The world leaders were safe, the attack was exposed, and Phoenix team stood vindicated on every screen across the globe. But Lynn wasn't done. She turned to the cameras. Emma was still running. This is Captain Linh Tran, Phoenix 7. For 5 years we've been dead because powerful men decided we were acceptable losses. Today we chose to rise not for revenge, but for justice. The conspiracy went to the highest levels of our government, but it ends here. Phoenix team requests immediate congressional investigation and full transparency. The American people deserve the truth. The German chancellor, who had remained despite evacuation orders, stepped forward. Captain Tran, on behalf of everyone here, we owe you our lives. Phoenix team has prevented a global catastrophe. General Hayes appeared on the main screen, direct from the Pentagon. Captain Tran, the president, has issued full pardons for Phoenix team and all volunteers involved in this operation. Furthermore, he's ordering immediate arrests of everyone implicated in Blackthorn's network. Furthermore, Hayes continued, effective immediately, Phoenix unit is officially reactivated as a special investigations team. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to root out the remaining corruption in our military and intelligence apparatus. Lynn looked at her team, Kim finally back from the dead, Maria and Jake, who'd never stopped believing, Turner, who'd healed more than just their bodies, Torres, who'd chosen redemption, Thompson and his Delta team, Cole, the drill sergeant who'd become a warrior again, and the recruits, Marcus, Emma, and the others who'd proven that courage didn't require experience. Phoenix accepts, she said simply. 3 months later, Fort Ridgeline had been transformed. The Phoenix Memorial Training Center stood where the old facilities had been, its mission statement carved in stone: ability over appearance, truth over obedience, justice over orders. Lynn stood before the newest class of recruits, her uniform bearing the Phoenix insignia that was no longer hidden. Behind her, the original team served as instructors, each teaching hard-won lessons about what it truly meant to serve. "You're here," she told the recruits, "not to follow blindly, but to think, to question, and to act with honor, even when, especially when your superiors don't. You're here to ensure that no soldier is ever again considered an acceptable loss for someone's political gain." Marcus, now a full sergeant and instructor himself, demonstrated combat techniques to another group his size no longer used for intimidation, but for protection. Emma worked with Jake in the Cyber Warfare Division, their skills helping expose 3 more corruption networks in the past month alone. Cole approached Lynn after the speech. "You know Blackthorn was sentenced yesterday. Life without parole, solitary confinement." "I know," Lynn replied, unconsciously, touching the Phoenix tattoo through her uniform. "But he was just middle management. Remember, Kim's intel suggests the real puppet masters are still out there." "Then we keep hunting," Maria said, joining them. "That's what Phoenix does. We rise from the ashes of betrayal and light the way for others." Dr. Turner, now head of the base medical facility, had instituted new protocols for identifying and treating soldiers who'd been listed as KIA but might have survived. They'd found 17 more dead soldiers in the past months, victims of various black operations. Torres, fully recovered and serving as intelligence liaison, brought Lynn a tablet. "New mission just came through. Congressional Oversight Committee wants Phoenix to investigate financial irregularities in defense contracting. Billions missing." "Sounds like Tuesday," Lynn said with a rare smile. "Assemble the team." As the sun set over Fort Ridgeline, the Phoenix flag flew alongside the American flag, a reminder that sometimes the dead must rise to save the living, that justice delayed is not always justice denied, and that the greatest act of patriotism might be refusing to follow orders that betray everything your nation stands for. The recruits were singing during their evening run a new cadence Cole had written: "Phoenix rises from the flame. Truth and honor, not just fame. When the darkness comes to call, stand together, never fall." Lynn watched them run, these young soldiers who would never be abandoned, never be sold, never be considered acceptable losses. The Phoenix had risen not just to expose one conspiracy, but to ensure it could never happen again. "You know," Kim said, appearing beside her, as he often did, still getting used to being officially alive again. "We actually did it. We changed things." "We started to," Lynn corrected. "The work continues." She looked at the memorial wall they'd built, honoring those who hadn't made it back, the real KIAs of operations like Nightfall. Each name a promise that their sacrifice would not be forgotten or exploited. Her phone buzzed with a message from General Hayes. "New situation developing. Eastern Europe. Need Phoenix immediately." Lynn smiled grimly and sent a 2-word reply: "Phoenix rises." The war against corruption was far from over, but for the first time in 5 years, the soldiers of Phoenix team were fighting it in the light, with the full support of a grateful nation, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying your enemies, but in transforming a broken system into something worthy of those who serve it. As night fell over the base, the Phoenix emblem glowed under the spotlights, a promise to every soldier that they would never be forgotten, never be abandoned, and never be betrayed by those they'd sworn to serve. The dead had risen, and in rising had given life to a new kind of military honor, one that valued truth over orders, justice over politics, and soldiers over transactions. The Phoenix had risen, and it would never fall again. 2 years had passed since Munich, and the world had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The Phoenix Memorial Training Center had become more than just a military installation. It had evolved into a symbol of institutional redemption, drawing observers from militaries worldwide who came to study what was simply called the Phoenix Doctrine. Lynn stood in her office studying a wall covered with red strings connecting photos, documents, and maps, a spider's web of corruption that stretched far beyond what they'd initially uncovered. Each string represented a life destroyed, a mission compromised, a truth buried. But now, slowly, methodically, they were cutting those strings. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Marcus entered no longer the bullying recruit, but a seasoned operator who'd found his true calling in protecting those weaker than himself. "Captain, we've got a situation. Remember that senator who kept blocking the investigation into defense contractors, Senator Walsh? He just requested a private meeting. Says he has information about something called Operation Cerberus." Lynn's blood chilled. Cerberus, the three-headed dog guarding the underworld. If Blackthorn's network was using mythological names, this was bigger than they'd imagined. The meeting was set for neutral ground, a small diner outside Washington that Jake had swept for surveillance 3 times. Senator Walsh looked older than his 60 years, hands trembling as he nursed cold coffee. "I voted against your funding," he said without preamble. "Blocked your investigations at every turn. Not because I was corrupt, Captain, but because I was terrified." "Of what?" Lynn asked, though she suspected she knew. "Of what you'd find. My son, he was military intelligence, died in Iraq 2017. Except, he didn't." Walsh pulled out a photograph, a young man in uniform, bright smile, entire future ahead of him. "He's alive, Captain. Part of Cerberus. They fake soldiers' deaths, then recruit them for operations that can't exist. My son has been dead for 7 years, but he calls me every Christmas from a blocked number. 30 seconds. Just long enough to say he's okay and he loves me." Maria leaned forward. "How many? Hundreds, maybe thousands. Not just American NATO allies, too. An entire army of the officially dead operating in the shadows, accountable to no one." Kim, who'd been silent, finally spoke. "I heard whispers when I was undercover. Cerberus wasn't just about black operations. They were building something, a parallel military structure completely outside government control. A private army of ghosts," Turner added, their medical mind already calculating implications. "Soldiers with no records, no accountability, no oversight." Walsh slid a drive across the table. "Everything I've gathered over 3 years. Locations, financial records, some names. I'm giving this to you because Phoenix is the only unit that can understand you've been where they are. Dead but walking." Emma, now a full intelligence analyst, was already reviewing the data on her secure tablet. "This is... Captain, they have training facilities in 12 countries. Shell companies funding operations. They're not just a rogue unit, they're a shadow government." The implications were staggering. Every military failure of the past decade suddenly looked different. Not incompetence, but intention. Not mistakes, but murders. "Why now?" Lynn asked Walsh. "Why reveal this?" "Because my son contacted me last week. Not the usual Christmas call. He said Cerberus is planning something that makes Munich look like a rehearsal. Something about resetting the global order. He begged me to find Phoenix, said you're the only ones who might be able to stop it." Back at Fort Ridgeline, the Phoenix team assembled in their secure conference room. The data from Walsh painted a picture more terrifying than anything Blackthorn had envisioned. Cerberus had operatives embedded in every major military intelligence positions in dozens of governments and resources that dwarfed most nations' defense budgets. "Look at this." Jake highlighted a series of financial transactions. "They're moving massive assets. billions in cryptocurrency gold reserves weapons. It's like they're preparing for war. Thompson finished. They're preparing for war. But against whom? Torres, who'd become their expert on shadow operations, studied the patterns. Not against anyone. They're going to start wars plural. Look at these operational plans. Simultaneous false flag operations designed to trigger conflicts between major powers. While the world burns, Cerberus emerges as the solution, a private military force that can restore order. Create the problem, sell the solution, Cole muttered. Oldest play in the book, just on a global scale. Lieutenant Rios, now Major Rios, and their liaison with legitimate intelligence services brought sobering news. I've confirmed Walsh's data through independent sources. We have maybe 2 weeks before Cerberus initiates. But here's the problem, half the people we'd report this to are probably compromised. We don't know who to trust. Lynn made a decision that would have seemed insane 2 years ago. Then we don't trust anyone. Phoenix handles this alone. Captain, Turner protested. We're talking about a force potentially 1,000 strong with resources we can't match. No, Lynn corrected. We're talking about soldiers who've been lied to, manipulated, and stolen from their families. Just like we were. We don't fight them, we free them. The plan that emerged was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than trying to stop Cerberus militarily, they would destroy it from within, by doing the one thing its controllers never expected, telling the truth to the dead soldiers who comprised it. Every one of these operatives thinks they're serving their country, Lynn explained. They believe they're heroes making the ultimate sacrifice. What happens when they learn they're just assets in someone's power grab? Kim had already begun working on a method to penetrate Cerberus's communication network. If we can reach them simultaneously, broadcast the truth directly to the operatives. They'll turn, Maria finished, just like we did when we learned the truth. The next days were a blur of preparation. Emma and Jake worked to create an unblockable broadcast system, bouncing signals off satellites, using emergency frequencies, and even hijacking commercial networks. Dr. Turner prepared medical protocols for potentially hundreds of soldiers who'd been living under false identities, many probably dealing with severe psychological trauma. Marcus led a team of the newer Phoenix recruits in preparing safe houses and extraction routes. These soldiers will need somewhere to go when their world collapses, he explained to his team. We're not just exposing lies, we're catching the people who fall when those lies crumble. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Senator Walsh's son, Timothy, reached out directly through an encrypted channel only Kim would recognize. Phoenix 7. The message read, I'm Cerberus 27. I know who you are. I know what you did in Munich. I've been trying to find a way out for 3 years, but they have my entire unit under their control. Help us, and we'll help you stop this. The video meeting that followed was surreal. Timothy Walsh looked like his father, but with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much. Behind him, partially visible, were 6 other figures. We're not the only ones with doubts, Timothy explained. Maybe a third of Cerberus suspect something's wrong, but we're isolated, monitored, controlled. They tell us our families will be killed if we deviate. Your father's alive and working with us, Lynn assured him. We can protect the families, but we need inside access to broadcast the truth simultaneously to all Cerberus operatives. I can give you that, but you need to understand the moment that broadcast goes out, it's war. The true believers and controllers won't go quietly. Thompson's team had been preparing for exactly that. We've identified 17 Cerberus facilities from the data. Strike teams ready to move the moment you give the word. Not strike teams, Lynn corrected. Rescue teams. We're not attacking, we're liberating. The night before the operation, Lin gathered the original Phoenix team on the roof of the command center. The stars above seemed especially bright, unmarred by clouds or city lights. 5 years ago we died, she said quietly. And in dying we discovered a truth that changed everything. Tomorrow we give that same terrible gift to thousands of others. We're about to tell them they're dead. But also that they can rise, Kim added. That's the difference. Blackthorn and Cerberus used our deaths. We're offering resurrection. Dr. Turner had been unusually quiet. I've been thinking about the mythology. The phoenix burns to death and rises from its own ashes. But Cerberus guards the underworld, keeping the dead from escaping. We're not just Phoenix anymore, we're becoming something else. Liberators of the underworld. Sounds pretentious, Cole grumbled, but there was affection in it. Let's just focus on getting everyone home alive. Everyone, Lin emphasized. Including Cerberus operatives. They're victims too. The operation began at 0300 hours GMT, timed to catch Cerberus facilities during shift changes when security was most vulnerable. But the real attack wasn't physical. It was informational. Jake and Emma initiated the broadcast from 7 different points, simultaneously making it impossible to block. The message was simple, devastating, and undeniable video testimony from Blackthorn's trial financial records showing how Cerberus operatives' deaths were faked, and most powerfully messages from their families. Senator Walsh had helped coordinate it. Hundreds of families recording messages to their dead children, spouses, parents. We know you're alive. We love you. Come home. The effect was immediate and chaotic. Across the globe, Cerberus operatives stopped mid-mission, staring at screens showing their own funeral footage juxtaposed with evidence of their exploitation. In a facility in Poland, an entire unit turned on their controllers demanding answers. In Japan, a Cerberus cell simply walked away from their posts, disappearing into the civilian population. In South Africa, operatives secured their base and raised a white flag requesting Phoenix extraction. But not everyone accepted the truth quietly. In 3 locations, Germany, Canada, and Brazil, hardcore Cerberus loyalists fought back, refusing to believe they'd been used. Phoenix teams go, Lin commanded, and the rescue operations launched. Marcus led the team into Germany, finding a facility in chaos. Half the operatives were trying to leave, while the other half tried to stop them. "Stand down!" he roared with the authority he'd learned from Cole. "Look at the evidence. Look at what they've done to you." One Cerberus operative, tears streaming down his face, lowered his weapon. "My daughter. She thinks I'm dead. She's 12 now. I missed 7 years." "You can get them back," Marcus said gently. "But first we need to secure this facility and get everyone to safety." In Canada, Maria's team found something unexpected: children. Cerberus had been training the orphaned children of operatives, telling them their parents had died as heroes, and they would honor them by serving. "Mother of God," Maria whispered, looking at kids no older than 15 in tactical gear. They were creating generational soldiers. Dr. Turner's medical teams were overwhelmed. Not just physical injuries, but psychological trauma on a massive scale. Soldiers who'd been living false lives for years, cut off from everything they'd known, suddenly faced with the truth of their exploitation. "It's like treating POWs," Turner explained to their expanded medical staff. Except the prison was in their minds, and the guards were people they trusted. Timothy Walsh became crucial in the aftermath, helping to identify and reach out to other Cerberus operatives who were struggling with the revelation. "We called ourselves the Dead Men Walking," he told Lin during one debrief. "Thought we were heroes, sacrificing everything. Finding out we were just assets, it breaks something inside." "It broke us too," Lin assured him. "But broken things can be rebuilt stronger. Phoenix proves that." The international response was unprecedented. NATO convened emergency sessions. The UN Security Council demanded investigations. Media outlets worldwide struggled to explain how thousands of soldiers had been secretly operating outside any government control. But the real victory came in smaller moments. Emma documented reunion soldiers walking through doors their families never expected to open again. Marcus coordinated reintegration programs using his own journey from bully to protector as a template for transformation. Jake worked to unravel Cerberus's financial network, recovering billions that were redistributed to victims' families. Kim took on perhaps the hardest task, hunting down the architects of Cerberus, who'd escaped the initial raids. "They're out there," he told Lynn during one late-night strategy session. "The real puppet masters. They'll try again with a different name, different methods." "Then we'll stop them again," Lynn replied, "and we'll keep stopping them." Cole, who'd officially retired but couldn't stay away, had started a program for Cerberus survivors. From the underworld to the light. He called it teaching them how to be soldiers again. Real soldiers, not shadows. 6 months after the Cerberus revelation, Fort Ridgeline hosted an unprecedented gathering. Over 3,000 soldiers who'd been declared dead stood in formation, Americans, British, French, German, and dozens of other nationalities. They called themselves the Risen, and they'd chosen to continue serving, but differently. General Hayes, promoted to chairman of the Joint Chiefs, addressed them. "You represent a failure of leadership at every level. We failed you, betrayed you, and abandoned you, but you also represent redemption proof that truth, no matter how buried, will surface." The Phoenix Doctrine was formally adopted by NATO forces, a commitment that no soldier would ever again be deliberately sacrificed for political gain, that operations required transparency within classified channels, and that every KIA would be verified independently. But Lynn knew the real victory wasn't in policies or doctrines. It was in the young recruits who now trained at Fort Ridgeline, learning from day one that their lives had value beyond their usefulness, that questioning orders was sometimes the highest form of patriotism, and that loyalty went both up and down the chain of command. Standing before the memorial wall, now expanded to include all of Cerberus's victims, Lynn touched each name. Rivera Chen and the others who hadn't lived to see justice. But also new names, those who'd died believing they were serving their countries when they were really serving someone's greed for power. "We can't bring them back," Torres said, joining her. He'd become the unofficial historian of both Phoenix and Cerberus, documenting every life stolen, every operation corrupted. "But we can make sure they didn't die for nothing." "They died for lies," Lynn corrected. "We live for truth. That's the difference." A young recruit approached nervously. "Captain Tran, I'm Private Jessica Chen. My brother was Eric Chen from your original unit." Lynn's breath caught. Eric Chen, who'd died during the Nightfall ambush, had never mentioned a sister. "He sent me a letter before that last mission," Jessica continued. "Said if anything happened, I should find you. That you'd tell me the truth. I've been waiting 5 years to ask, did my brother die a hero?" Lynn thought of Eric's final moments, fighting to give the rest of them time to escape, knowing they'd been betrayed, but still choosing to protect his team. "Yes," she said firmly. "Your brother died a hero, but more importantly, he lived as one. He chose his team over himself, truth over comfort, and honor over survival. That's what we teach here now, his kind of heroism." Jessica nodded, tears in her eyes, but steel in her spine. "Then I want to learn. I want to be like him." As the sun set over Fort Ridgeline, casting long shadows from the memorial, Lynn realized this was the true victory, not the exposure of Cerberus or Blackthorn's conviction. But this young soldier's choosing to serve with full knowledge of the potential costs and the absolute certainty that their lives mattered. The Phoenix had risen, had freed Cerberus's trapped souls, and had fundamentally changed how military service was understood. But the work continued. Somewhere out there, new conspiracies were forming new ways to exploit those who served. And Phoenix would be ready not as dead soldiers returned for vengeance, but as living testimony that truth once revealed could never again be buried. Thompson found her as the ceremony ended. New intelligence from our European contacts. Something called Hydra Protocol just went active in Eastern Europe. Lynn smiled grimly. Another mythological name, another conspiracy to unravel. Gather the team. Looks like we're not done rising yet. Will we ever be? Maria asked, joining them. Maybe not, Lynn admitted, unconsciously touching the Phoenix tattoo that was no longer hidden but worn proudly on unit patches throughout the base. But that's okay. Some fires need to keep burning to light the way for others. As Fort Ridgeline settled into evening routines, the sound of training continued, recruits learning not just to fight, but to think, to question, to protect. The Phoenix Doctrine had become more than military policy. It had become a philosophy of service that valued every life, demanded accountability at every level, and recognized that sometimes the greatest act of courage was refusing to follow orders that betrayed the very principles you'd sworn to defend. The dead had risen, had brought others with them from the underworld, and in doing so had created something unprecedented. A military culture that could acknowledge its failures, correct its course, and ensure that never again would soldiers be treated as acceptable losses in someone else's game. Phoenix had risen, and it would keep rising as many times as necessary until the job was done.